All right. Recognizing everybody has to catch a flight, we're going to make this short and sweet. Three max, 5 minutes. Going now. I promised that last goes first this time, so Mr. Cameron Kelly, please come to the booth.
Podium.
Whatever.
So I was going to start by saying anybody who thinks these guys don't listen to your recommendations, clearly they do since I'm going first. So especially with Mike now being in charge of technology and the data analysts, certainly there was a lot of crossover, and we spent time talking about how technology can help DA, how they can bring down the backlog, things like that. We also spent some time with the stamping committee as well, so there might be some crossover, but certainly you can talk about it twice. One of the first things we talked about is connecting technology and the DAs together. We talked about a best practices committee that you would get the leads from the DA with the technology, as well as some key users of technology amongst the DAs to meet monthly, talk about the processes and workflow, how can they be improved from a technology standpoint. Also amongst the DAs is to document what are those best practices they can share with everybody else. But in the process, if they can create an improvement list for the technology people to work on, and again, in order to create the efficiencies as well. The second item, we talked about how through the technology component, how leads can get tied up, DAs can get tied up when you have items that can't be finalized and there's open items that have to be processed. Maybe it requires a phone call. But the idea is have technology create a workflow system such that add a status code so that if an item can't be finalized, whether it requires a phone call, whether it requires an interaction between the lead and the DA, is to take that, add the status code, and then it can be moved over into some sort of queue for the lead to go through those. Because the other thing is when the DAs are constantly interrupted, because if they have to make a phone call, then they can't get a hold of the person, then they get on something else, and then now the phone call comes back, they get tired. It's breaking the flow of the work. So we talked about that. And one quick one, it's kind of like a half. One of the things that slows down the DAs is looking for SIC codes, and two, it's a training process to teach the DAs what SIC codes are, where they look them up, how do they understand them. And so there's technology out there where the NAICS has the database of all the companies where they already know what those codes are. And so rather than having DAs even worry about it, just automate it and take care of that. And then the last one, we talked about how can California call themselves a green state and yet we still have 5% of the filings are paper filings. I think we're at a point now that we just cut it off. That there's no more paper filings allowed, that you would just have, you can still have PDF uploads for sure. Long term, we'd like to get to the more of the slip data component of it. But as far as the paper filings, paper's dead. Let's move on. And along that, it goes back to the paper statements as well. They're sending out about 800 to 1,000 statements per month to brokers, and it's time to cut that off as well. Get your statement either emailed or get it from the slip account. So those are ideas.
Great, thank you. Cameron, thank you. That took 4 minutes, 50 seconds. That gives Hank Haldeman 5 minutes and 10 seconds for his point. Legislator, please.
You ceding me 10 seconds? So we covered a number of things. First of all, we took a look at the current legislation that we're tracking, which is dealing with the legislation arising out of last year's wildfires. There are a number of them that are of concern to our industry, and we will be circulating information on 3 in particular that we're tracking. We'll advise what they're about. We also are going to have input as to the degree to which they apply to and will affect the non-admitted market as opposed to more generally the property and homeowners markets. But that we will be reporting on. That's not a recommendation. Also, we talked a bit about the upcoming elections for commissioner and what may come of that, so we'll also be reporting back on that to you guys. One of the things that we then took a look at was our recommendations from a year ago, suggestions, and we actually accomplished a great deal with regard to a number of them, including a fly-in in Sacramento that we did about a month ago, which was well attended by our committee and very successful, very positive input, and we're evolving that. But we also noted that we got our key piece of legislation that we were seeking last year, which was dealing with modernizing the export list, passed, and that leads into one of our recommendations that I'll come to in a minute. But we spent a lot of our time talking about this plan, which the staff has put together, which is the political communications strategic plan going forward for becoming more effective in terms of legislating on behalf of, or advocating on behalf of our industry, both in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. And that leads to my ability to talk about our 3 recommendations, which first, with the passage of the modernization of the export list, the department will go through a process of, or the staff at the department will go through a process of figuring out how they're going to apply that. And our action with regard to that is, first, we need to reach out to the key staff within the department and get a sense of what they're thinking in advance of their actually implementing it, and hopefully have some input into that process and what standards they're going to use with the revised, apply the revised standards for the access to the export list. And then once we have those in hand, we'll work hand in glove with individuals within our industry, probably people in this room, that are going to seek for new items to be added to the export list to help them fit what the department expects as far as the criteria and the presentations that will be entailed. So that's kind of key action number 1. Number 2, coming out of the political communications strategic plan, is a focus on D.C. and the fact that there are key legislators in D.C. that are from California, and by key I mean as respects the insurance industry nationally and as it affects us. And we as Californians have particular capability to have influence, communication, and effectiveness and advocacy in dealing with them. But we don't have any real direct channel at this point in time. So we're talking about what that direct channel might look like and what we might do. And our working plan at this point in time is to work with and through WSIA and the efforts that WSIA currently has in Washington, D.C. WSIA has a lobbyist, which is Fager BD, that represents WSIA in D.C., and they are doing exactly the 2 things that we need, which is, number 1, monitoring legislation and before it happens and while it's happening, as it affects the insurance industry, and particularly how it affects the non-admitted side of the insurance industry. We want to get a more robust channel of communication on that so that we can look at it from the California-centric perspective and provide feedback on that. Secondarily, when you get to the point where you need to advocate, you need to already be known to the people that you're going to talk to. They need to know who you are. They need to understand what your background is. You have to have a relationship. And so our intent is to talk with WSIA and with Fager BD and figure out whether we can piggyback on that relationship, maybe have a secondary contract, but utilize the fact that they're already doing a lot of what we need on behalf of the National Association, and look at how we can structure a relationship through WSIA and with Fager BD to, again, get a more effective channel of communication back as to what's going on, and start to get an identity for the California Surplus Line Association and key people within it with the legislators and key staff dealing with insurance in Washington, D.C. What's my time?
You have 20 seconds.
Great. Number 3. We need to broaden our connection with the representatives that, particularly in the state, that represent us. But across the board, we need to get a much broader set of connections with members of this association. So, if you think about it, just a show of hands, how many people in the room know who their senators in Washington, D.C. are? 2 of them, right? Some people don't. How many of you know who your representative is in the House of Representatives? How many of you know the state senator who represents you? I don't mean in Washington, D.C., I mean in Sacramento. How many of you know the assembly member that represents you? No one who's not on staff. That is where we need to have connections, because you all have representatives based on where you live, and a lot of those representatives are people who are influential in the insurance and banking and those committees that have direct impact on what we do. We need them to know that we exist. And there's only one way we can do that. And the first thing is that we need to start by identifying who is in whose district. I could circulate you the list, and you wouldn't know whether you're in anybody's district or not. You could be in the chairman of the committee, and you wouldn't know because you don't know who your representative is. The only way we can connect that is by connecting your home address with your representatives. We have an easy way to do that. We have a website that's been set up where we can go in and register who we are and what our home address is on behalf of the SLA. It's part of the SLA. I'm not going to read the URL for it because it's long. We're going to send every one of you an email, and it's going to have a hyperlink. Click it, fill it out, put us in the position where we know who is where. We're not asking you to go call these people. We're not going to throw you in a room and expect you to advocate without assistance, without preparation, or without a member of the legislative committee or staff with you. But this is our starting point. And then once you've done it, share it with somebody in your office. That's our third action.
Thanks, Hank. Fantastic. Representing the Stamping Committee, Terry Moran.
Thank you, Bob. Well, we had a pretty lively discussion. This is, and everybody that was on the committee was new on the committee this year, so we did a bit of time just going through how it works, what our goals are. And we did pick 3 items, and we picked term issues related to the board. We discussed the backlog issue, and then we also talked about pro formas. So as far as term issues, what we're going to recommend is a couple things. Is we had talked about whether officers should serve a second term, and we decided they should not unless they wanted to. So, because if you think about it, if you're going in as secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and chair, and then past chair, that's 8 years. So if you start to think about that, you're like, well, not maybe everybody wants to do that. So we thought it could be if you were working on a big project, you might want to do it, but if you're not, we would leave it the same way, but leave it as an alternative. We also talked about, and we already do this, if you're the chair, you roll off after past chair. So that's an automatic roll off the board. So we do believe that at some point, people on the board should probably serve 5 years, up to 5 years, take a break, and then they can come back on as a board member again. So that'll be part of our recommendation. We also thought that we should never roll off any more than 3 at a time because we want to have that continuity. We talked about whether we should formalize the criteria to be a board member, and so we're going to work on that. There is some informal criteria, but we'd like to see that formalized so people understand what we look for in that role. We also came up with the team, it was a great idea, of having 2 associate members on the board. We would like to find a way to get the younger folks into the board, and to be a board member, you know, you have to have a pretty lofty position almost. That's probably a poor choice of words. But we're thinking of having 2 associate members. They would not be voting members, but they'd be able to participate and that way get exposed to that and then maybe roll on when they reach the levels that they need to. So we think that should be done by the next gen chair and the stamping chair. Make recommendations and then bring it to the board. So we thought that would be a really interesting idea to pull some of the younger people in. We did also talk about mergers and acquisitions. So when we have a big merger or acquisition, all of a sudden we might have 5 people from the same firm that are on the board. So we just wanted to acknowledge that if we should do something about it, they would finish the term that they're in, and then we would address it as we look at the new, as I look at a couple people around the room. So as we'll look at that when it comes time to look at the new board for the next year. So those are some of the issues that we addressed as term issues. Then we did discuss the backlog. The amount of money that's sitting in backlog is astounding, and I know everybody's working on that, so we felt that it was an important thing for the stamping committee to get involved in. And we set a goal. We said 100% slip data by 2022. Now, whether that's achievable or not, we don't know. We still have to do some evaluation, but if you don't set a goal, you're never going to get there. So we thought at a minimum of a 5 percentage point improvement every year of the amount of SLIP data that goes in, and a couple of other ideas. So we have a number of ideas around that. A lot of that's going to involve the education committee. We think there's got to be a carrot and a stick. I mean, we got to come up with some ideas that incentivize them. I bet most of you don't know that when it comes in through PDF, it's got a 30% error ratio versus when it's done through SLIP data, only 3. So if a broker understood that it's taking you that much more time because you got to redo it every time, they may all of a sudden say maybe that SLIP data is not that bad a deal. So I think there's a lot more we can do to get that working in that fashion. We talked about having a video on that, where you actually do a video where you could be in that video too. Anyway, so a video where you have someone sitting there who's doing it the old-fashioned way to get the error back, and then do one where you show how you do it very simply. Maybe if people start to see it that way, they'll think about it. Am I done? Okay, third. We talked about it. We haven't done it yet, pro formas. We still need to get out in front of this 3-year pro forma to really start looking at our income and our expenses on a 3-year basis so we can better fund for special projects and things that we know we need to do. So that's my report.
Great, Terry. Thank you. Special Advisory Committee, John Lawson, please.
All right. For us, for Special Advisory, the same. We came up with a 3-year timeline we'd like to see implemented within the SLA. There's so many topics that we had discussed. When we broke it down to 2 items we'd like to see accomplished within the first year. One, we felt it was important to ideally set up a platform for best practices where wholesale brokers can go to help them prepare for audits dealing with the CDI. I mean, ideally a platform that shares the knowledge from other brokers on their experiences, from their audits, in essence, the do's and don'ts of what to do in an audit, frequently asked questions, something that's really going to help them save money when it comes to being audited, the fees. Ideally, this platform would be, SLA website, or ideally a video that can, it seems like video seems to be the best way of communication these days. So I think we can definitely make some money with that. Second task we chose was basically just how we can get the SLA more visible, more of a household name. We came up with a lot of ideas. I think continually for the SLA to be visible with all the wholesale conferences, being with SIA, CEWA, Western States. Just continue spreading the word, visiting offices, brokerage, as well as maybe even working with nonprofit societies and pairing up and partnering up with nonprofits just to getting the SLA name associated with. And obviously social media. Social media is huge. Bigger presence within social media, college campuses, working with the other committees, Next Gen, education, legislation, just to keep spreading the word. So those are the 2 we chose. Yeah. So keep it short and sweet.
Thank you, John. Next Gen, Pam, please, cozy.
Thank you. Okay, so Next Gen, we were very busy, and we came up with a couple things that we think you're going to like. Number 1, we're scrapping our marketing. We didn't like it, so we're redoing that. We came up with some really good ideas and ways to actually, we're supposed to be attracting and retaining young professionals, and so we're going to make that a little bit more focused for them. And the second thing we're going to do is our website. I went to look for our career page on our website and couldn't find it yesterday. So we're going to create a next generation kind of platform where everything Next Gen will be right there on that page and easy to find, maybe a big button when they first come into the SLA website itself, and kind of have the same branding and messaging that we're promoting when we go out to colleges and trying to attract young people. One of the other things that we thought what we kind of learned through going out to colleges was that what's in it for me when they come by your booth? And we really don't have an actual, well, we have a job right here for you today. So what we came up with was we're willing to invest in you. So investing in you in things like resume help was one of those. We will help you with your resume for the insurance industry. We have a lot of committee members that are willing to take a look at that and help them help guide them through our industry. Another was a 30-minute chat with a committee member or someone in the industry already to kind of talk to them and kind of see, you have someone that you can talk to that's been in the industry forever, and is this for me, is this not for me, kind of thing. The next idea we came up with for investing is a 3-day shadow program where we take a person and we, one day at the SLA, one day with a broker, one day with a carrier, and kind of see if that's for you and if you like that, and kind of support that in Northern and Southern California. And finally, as another thing for investing is a scholarship for a potential person that's kind of gone through all these other steps, and provide a little bit of help and assistance there. And these items aren't just given. To do a shadow program or have a scholarship, you have to be vetted through the committee, so it's not just a handout kind of thing. So that was one of our big things. We're also want to collaborate more with all the other professional organizations, EIP, CPCU, IDAYS, ICF, whatever else is out there. A lot of us are already involved in other items, but actually have more formalized next-gen representation at some of these other functions. And then one of the kind of came up, one of the last things that came up is we're a bunch of young people on the team. And they came up with, would we be able to provide them with leadership training? And I thought that was a great idea, to have some form of formalization with any committee, younger committee members that would like to go through some type of leadership training. So we'd like to put some arms and legs around that this year. That's it.
Thank you, Pam. Mr. Shea, Education and Compliance. Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, Jerry. Tim, don't take this as, Jerry's leaving. Hank, there goes Hank. Safe flight.
No, that's perfect. Okay. Well, obviously, I have some big shoes to fill because I'm taking over the Education and Compliance Committee, and Tina Abrams did a wonderful job for so many years. So thank you very much. And also, I have a good group of committee members as well. So it's making this transition a lot easier for me. So that's great. One of just a few things that we talked about was in regards to the e-learning seminar. We're going to continue to work on getting that put together, working with the tech department and the Department of Insurance to get that CE class either live streaming or online, so we can have more participation with it. We also discussed adding more locations or on-site locations or physical locations like San Diego and Orange County or possibly Sacramento to see if we can get more attendance. The second item, we talked about some of the courses for the 2019 CE calendar year. Some of the topics that we talked about were active shooter coverage, political and global risk exposures, and product recall. And then at the end, we also talked about on the compliance side, kind of building a library of best practice resources for all the SLA members. Some of those items that we want to include or that we started talking about for those best practices was the video on how to file an SL1, SL2. Also, we did talk about the CDI audit. So, John, if you guys want to bring your stuff in, we'll take that into the library as well. The other stuff we talked about was the SLA license and registration, and also how to process your renewals and things like that as well. And then we also started discussing, in addition to the CDI audit, was kind of setting up a standard operating procedure for the items that need to go into the files and stuff like that for audits. So something like an application, quotes, and policies and things like that. So those are the things that we were talking about as best practices that we were put online, so SLA members can have a resource to go to and be able to find additional information. So that's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Last but not least, the admitted market, Susan Atkins. Save the best to last.
Thank you. Hello. I wish I had my ukulele. I get a little stage fright here. Anyways, as far as the Admitted Market Liaison Committee, I am honored to be part of this group. I'm very thankful for Jerry Sullivan and for Susan Bryant, who did a fantastic job on our agenda. Our first topic is that we feel that we meet currently with 4 associations up in Sacramento annually, AIA, ACIC, PCI, and PIF. And we feel that we need to reach out more, maybe more than annual, but also meet with other associations within California, including Paddock, Triple I, who receive a quarterly newsletter, and then also the CPC Society. And I don't know if all of you know, but they have 14 interest groups, including an excess surplus interest group, as well as international, which I think would be beneficial to find out what emerging trends are happening outside of the U.S. as well. I think that would be we think that would be really important to reach out to them and find out what webinars and other education opportunities that they're offering as well. Also, Big I Days, WSIA, CIAB, RMIS, and collaborating with other SLA committees, especially education and next gen. And as far as how will we communicate with these associations, we want to reach out to the members that we have at SLA, as well as the committees who are involved in these organizations. And many of these groups have next gens, so next gens, you can really help out a lot in this area. And we also want to keep Joy busy, so we have some 3-minute video ideas as well. Item number 2, we feel we need to strengthen our message, find the capabilities to strengthen our message with meaningful data and an emphasis on claims and loss information, specific for regulators, admitted companies, associations, next generation, and various others. We would like to spotlight events and individual claims insured by non-admitted carriers, giving visuals of the importance of the E&S market, showing examples of how we are stable in a viable market. And item 3, we would like to create an emerging exposures bulletin board on the website, similar to a job board, where interested parties can learn about the emerging trends, as well as find coverages available that are in the non-admitted market. And for instance, cannabis, cryptocurrency, workplace violence, active shooter training, tax audit cover. And if anybody knows anything about the SSL certificates that are supposed to expire in October, I'd be really interested in knowing about that, because I went to a leadership summit at the CPCU Society in Baltimore last week, and they were talking about that's the next Y2K kind of issue where you could have business income losses. So that's it. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Before we wrap this up, just a couple of things. Number one, everybody's told me the energy in this place has been incredible the past day and a half. And each year it gets better. Really, truly appreciate all your input. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come back. Hope you go forward and do more. Before I leave, the most important thing is to thank the people that have put this together, that is behind the scenes, but I know you've seen them, but I just wanted to mention them by name. Debbie Carr, Annie Short, Caroline Gilbert, Glenn Lung, Michelle Hudson, Donna Banks, who was not here but did a lot to get this together, Patrick Powers for photography, fantastic video, James Green, and Tai Tai, who I call Tay Squared. So I hope you're okay with that, Tay. All right. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. See you soon.